Morning. We're going to go ahead and begin. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm Shane Harris, the president and founder of the People's Association of Justice Advocates and a resident of San Diego County District 4. Today, I'm proud to join with Supervisor Anderson and residents across our county in urging and pushing for a fair and an on-time and balanced budget for all residents across our region. The situation that the county is facing is a tremendous concern to my office from a budgetary standpoint, and I'll be able to talk about that in just a few minutes. But I think the overall concern that I have and my office has in regard to a proposal being brought forth at the supervisors meeting tomorrow that would seek to delay or sort of push back the budget timelines in our county and the approval timelines is that it ultimately is a moment in which our region is facing a tremendous budget deficit, upwards of $138 million. And the concerns that I have is that to continue to push back and back and back the budget timelines puts county programs at risk. Many of you saw my statement on this yesterday, and I think it's really important to note that budgets state values. Budgets state values. And when we pass budgets at the city levels and the county levels, it states where we are going to invest our resources for our region's most vulnerable and for our residents across the region. And I think ultimately the concern that I have with the situation that we are currently seeing is because we have a budget deficit that is growing by the month, millions upwards monthly, it continues to grow. And because I'm a resident of Bankers Hill, which is the western part of the county District 4, and where I sit in the city of San Diego, where we are facing a $250 million budget deficit, we are seeing cuts to programs that have, some have been useful and some haven't in context of the city of San Diego. The further and the more that spending continued to go on autopilot, the more it put real programs at risk at the city level. And so watching from that level and sort of seeing the concerns at the city level and how this plays out with a $250 million budget deficit, I'm greatly concerned with a proposal tomorrow that would seek to put the county's budget timeline on autopilot until a district seat that is currently vacant is filled. And so today I am calling on the county supervisors to pass an on-time, a fair, and a balanced budget for all of our residents. I've spoken to Spring Valley residents in the eastern part of our district who are greatly concerned, in the southeastern part of our district who are greatly concerned, who understand the call to action here and who understand the context of what we are dealing with in regard to this deficit and in regard to the deficit growing, services possibly being at stake. And so I think ultimately what we're asking for is a fair and an on-time balanced budget that seeks to deal with some of those long-standing services, spaces of behavioral health and homelessness, in the spaces of child welfare and senior programs, and on and on and on in regard to the concerns that we face on a budgetary level in this county and how we must deliberate that conversation to ensure that we have that fair and that equitable budget. So, one of the things that I'm concerned with pushing the timeline back, what that would do is, one, it would put us deeper in the hole, right, in regard to what we are facing in the deficit that is growing. And like I said, I've seen this at the city level, what we are dealing with at the city, $250 million budget deficit, and how that is affecting residents and how that is affecting, and there's big arguments about what equity is and who should get what. What Supervisor Anderson is saying is very logical, reasonable, and rational here, right? It's that we need to pass an on-time and a balanced budget that can deal with a lot of these long-standing issues and concerns along the lines of behavioral health and foster care and homelessness, that we should get this budget done now so we can stop the autopilot of spending, right? No family in this county, and we're talking about inflation, right? No family in communities in this county, especially our most poverty-stricken communities, is sitting back and saying, we're just gonna keep spending and keep leaking out the money, and we don't have anything to pay the rent, to deal with the bills. Nobody's doing that. So if families have to deliberate and figure out what can we continue to pay for and what can't we pay for, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, why shouldn't government have to do the same thing? And so I think that's the ultimate call to action here, is we want to ensure that an on-time, balanced, fair budget is deliberated here. Finally, in closing, I want to ensure that the core services that I mentioned earlier, behavioral health, mental health, child welfare. I was in the system for 13 years. I've seen the impact of the county's child welfare system and how we must continue to ensure that foster youth have the most support during these times. These are the kids of the county. And on and on and on, homelessness, seniors, and public safety, need I say. The unincorporated parts of our county will pay a tremendous deficit if we do not pass an on-time, fair, and balanced budget that deliberates along the lines of public safety, behavioral health, child welfare, and on and on and on, senior services. We must ensure that this budget is fair, balanced, and on time for the average county resident. And that is why I am proud to join Supervisor Anderson in ensuring that tomorrow, when supervisors vote, that they vote to deliberate that kind of conversation, that we have a real conversation about values, right? And I believe firmly, in closing, that we need to have, many people argue, okay, well, if we do a 2-on-2, right? This is not about politics. Let the supervisors come together and deliberate a budget. And sometimes in budget conversations, there is compromise. If you're at the dinner table with your family and you're talking about what you're gonna do in regard to cutting this or cutting that, there's conversations that happen at the logical levels with the common family. Logical conversations, and there's debates. Well, I don't wanna cut Cox Cable. Well, I don't wanna cut this, I don't wanna cut that. Or I wanna keep this, I wanna keep that. I'm calling on the supervisors to come together from all sides of the political table to meet the moment for all county residents, to ensure that our unincorporated areas don't get swept aside because of budget deliberations that cannot happen because we are not thinking like families have to think every day. And I had the same conversation with our leaders at the city of San Diego. Now there's tremendous penalties that the residents of the city of San Diego are paying because the city failed to manage, pass, and strategically look at on-time, balanced, and fair budgets. So that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a conversation of fairness. We're dealing with a conversation of equity. We're dealing with a conversation of justice. And we're dealing with a conversation of strategy. What is the best strategy to deal with the moment that we are in, right? This is not about what's happening in Washington, D.C. This is about spending on autopilot that has been going on for years and years and years. You don't get into a deficit, wake up tomorrow and say, my God, I can't pay my rent. Nobody does that. It is spending decisions that creates budgets, values that are stated in budgets, and then ultimately what you have is you have a deficit that can grow under your feet if you're not strategic. So as I stated early on, I'm deeply concerned that the idea and the concept, I think well-intentioned, right? Well-intentioned here, because there's an argument that can be made about a district that is unrepresented. But I want to remind us that in 2023, I believe, when a former supervisor stepped down from my county district, we did not stop voting for a budget because he resigned. And I don't believe that because someone suddenly decided to resign for their own reasons, that district residents should not receive and get that support in the spaces of behavioral health, child welfare. South Bay, second largest child welfare population in the county, right? I want to ensure that we understand the moment that we are in, that the supervisors, I believe, can deliberate, Supervisor Anderson, Supervisor Desmond, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp, and Supervisor Tara Lawson-Raymer, are smart enough and strategic enough to deliberate amongst each other, figure out how to meet the moment, compromise amongst each other for the residents of this county, ensure that the residents in the unincorporated areas, including in our county district, District 4, in Spring Valley and other areas like that, don't get swept aside, and ensuring that the cities don't get swept aside. We can meet the moment from all angles. So I'm calling on county supervisors to meet this moment. Later today, my office of the People's Association of Justice Advocates, or this morning, I think it's already issued. If not already issued, it will be issued. There will be a letter that will go out publicly, as well as to all supervisors, urging them to pass this on-time, fair, and balanced budget at their meeting tomorrow, to ensure that that's done and to ensure that we meet this moment for all of our county residents, no matter what color of skin, no matter what background, no matter where they're from, our children in child welfare, all the way to those who are stricken in poverty on our streets. We must meet this moment with logical, reasonable, and rational reforms. And by getting an on-time budget done, guess what? We can meet the deficit with strategy instead of spending on autopilot until a seat is filled. That those same services that are being argued, that I mentioned earlier, District 1 needs. By not doing that, we delay the timeline and ultimately push this back and even put District 1 residents at stake. So I'm calling on the county to get this done, ensure that all districts, unincorporated cities, are represented in this moment by passing a fair and an on-time and a balanced budget. Supervisor Anderson?
Thank you, Reverend Shane Harris, for inviting me to this press conference today. Reverend Harris is a dedicated community leader and a civic rights activist who works to make a positive difference in our communities every day. Thank you for that. 2 weeks ago, I wrote an op-ed in the Times of San Diego about working together to pass a balanced budget on time at the San Diego County Board of Supervisors, because I knew over 600,000 unincorporated residents rely on us as their only government. You see, if you live in Bonita, Lakeside, Fallbrook, Borrego Springs, the county government is your only government. We don't have a mayor, we don't have a city council, we just have the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors are responsible to those constituents to provide for their law enforcement, fire safety, emergency services, road maintenance, building permits, animal shelters, parks, libraries, mental health, homelessness, and more. Services that even some of the cities contract with the county to provide. Our constituents in the unincorporated communities shouldn't be punished or shouldn't be denied the services they rely on because the Board of Supervisors refuses to compromise and work together. I don't want to kick the can down the road and have this reflect on the current board's leadership, which is why I signaled that my door is open to compromise and solutions. With the exception of COVID in 2021, the county leadership has always passed a balanced budget on time without delay. The county is currently facing over $130 million in budget deficits right now. We're spending more money than we're bringing in, and that number grows with each and every week. So it's really important that we address it. Senior county leadership has either quit or been let go. Programs have started with one-time funding sources with no future funding identified, and there's now a push to lower our financial reserve, raise taxes on our families who have already are struggling with inflation, and potentially pursue a new bond. By not passing the budget on time, we're sending a signal to Wall Street we're not capable of leading, and it's going to impact our bottom line. The Board of Supervisors' number one job is to address these important issues by passing a budget. It's always easier for elected officials to kick the can down the road rather than address the rough, tough decisions that government needs to do to work for its citizens. I'm the only supervisor that lives in the unincorporated community, so the budget affects me personally and over 600,000 of my neighbors. That's why I understand how important this budget is to the people we represent. My door is open, and I stand ready to collaborate and compromise with my colleagues to provide solutions that may not be perfect, but they'll work for our communities. I will continue to support a balanced budget passed on time by June 30th per our county ordinance. My years in public service have taught me that leadership isn't about digging in and grandstanding. It's about finding common ground and moving forward. Together, we can find this path forward only if we put petty politics and partisanship aside. And I stand ready to work with my colleagues and won't be supporting item 22. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Anderson. I'll take questions at this time. I do want to note, in regard to what the supervisor said, never has the County of San Diego delayed or pushed the budget timeline back in this kind of way. And I think it's notable that he said that. I've noticed that none of the reasons that I said that I wouldn't be supporting item 22 tomorrow had anything to do with that. But if that adds any aspect to this, I think it's that we do need to have a real conversation about what this would mean from a precedent-setting level. In the future, are we saying that if someone resigns suddenly, that we wait until that seat is filled to deliberate a budget? And so this is a statement of values, not just from a budgetary standpoint of the issues and the investments that we as a county make in residents and citizens across the county, but it's also a statement of values in how we handle budget deliberations and how we adjust and timelines based on resignations, based on death, based on whatever may happen, God forbid, to any of our supervisors. And I think that is the bigger conversation here is also, this has never been done, right? So do we change it now? It's like one of the reasons why Washington, D.C. folks don't want to move certain processes in Washington, D.C. in Congress because it sets precedents on both sides of the political table, by the way. So I think Supervisor Montgomery Stepp, well-intentioned here. I think that I understand her argument for the residents of District 1, right? I understand that conversation. However, not even her district had that courtesy when there was a resignation suddenly in the middle of budget season.
If I may,
Yeah.
it wasn't a courtesy. You can't stop the world because somebody didn't show up. So if
Right.
I call in sick,
Yeah.
does that mean you're not going to pass the budget? Of course you're going to pass the budget. Budgets are not in stone. Budgets can be changed. When Monica got elected, she came to us and said, hey, you missed this. So budgets aren't in stone. They can be changed with 4 votes at any time, along the process. We had strong leadership under Norva Vargas. And after our board chair had stepped down, we went ahead and passed the board a budget because we knew how important it was to the unincorporated. We knew how important it was for our foster kids and for everyone else. This departure in the ruse of saying it's for District 1, what happens if the person gets elected, 2 minutes later, gets hit by a Mack truck and can't show up? Are we going to delay further? This acts as if we can't make changes to the budget if we get something wrong. There was an argument saying, well, we don't know what the federal government's going to cut and not cut. There hasn't been a budget in the county that we weren't worried that the state government would cut our funding. Most of our programs are either federal or state, and yet we've never delayed up until this day, always not knowing for sure if we're going to have 100% funding. These are not solid arguments. This window dressing. And again, if we want a path forward, we got to put petty politics and partisanship aside and focus on the people that we represent. And I don't want anybody in District 1 not to be represented, but at the same time, it's not fair to hold back the budget when we don't know what the outcome is. And we've never changed path, no matter how many people have stepped down over the years, no how many times people have left office. We've always moved the budget on time, June 30th. That's why it's in our ordinance. We're changing our ordinance, or we're attempting to, and that will change the policy moving forward. And by the way, when the federal government doesn't get its budget on time, how's that helpful to anybody? It's a lack of leadership, and I don't want to be part of a board that has a lack of leadership, just like the federal government.
I'll take questions at this time.
Joel, while you're there, if you
Sure.
don't mind. So you have a budget until June 30th.
Correct.
How is this autopilot, and I know that's Shane's expression, you're under constraints of this budget, and you say we can change it any time, but generally, so I don't understand about where we are with out of control spending or autopilot spending.
So we have a huge budget deficit that's growing each and every week. If we don't address it, we funded programs, pilot programs, with one-time money. I asked for a list from our CAO of all those programs because I wanted to see how bad the damage is. That was one-time money. Now it's going to have to come from our general fund as it moves forward, and we have no money in the general fund. So does that mean 600,000 people have their services cut because we failed to do our job? Supervisors have only one job only. The most important job, that's to pass the budget on time every year so that the rest of the government has a budget to work from and can fund the programs.
Hey, Ed,
So
can I
we're
chime in?
done.
Can I chime in on this real quick?
Just finish
Okay.
my questions with him, please.
Sure.
What I'm trying to understand is, you've still got till June 30th. You're saying the spending.
They want to kick it back to
they wanna
October.
Kick it down to October.
Right.
And you're saying in the meantime, the spending, so-called discretionary spending or changing it, we will continue to grow the deficit?
Correct.
And we need to get the deficit done now, period.
Per-
We need to, well, because you still have to balance it in October.
That's
All
correct.
right.
That's correct. But by that, so just a short time ago, the number was 56 million. It's more than doubled, and it's going to continue to double and triple and quadruple. We need to address this as quickly as possible. Right now, we need to get it done. And the excuse, though, is things that aren't relevant. Right? We've gone through these turbulent times in the past. When Nathan Fletcher stepped down, we didn't hesitate to pass a budget. I don't recall Supervisor Stepp saying, my district got a shortchanged in it. They didn't get shortchanged. And if they did, Supervisor Stepp, Montgomery Stepp, could have turned around and said, look, I'd like to make a budget adjustment, and we would have voted on it, and we would have made a budget adjustment. But this notion that you're going to do the budget once, and you're going to stop all government to do that is just wrong and failed. And I spent 12 years in the state legislature. I saw firsthand what kicking the can down the road does. You know, when I voted on the budget in the state assembly, it was $86 billion. And now, fewer than 20 years later, our budget is $320 billion last year at the state. Were the roads improved? Do we fully fund education? No. We kept kicking the can down the road, not addressing the real issues that impact our constituents. Look, I get it. Everyone's running for a higher office. I want to deliver for my constituents and all San Diegans that we have a budget on time, mental health is there, homeless services are there, and we're funding core resources. See, many of my colleagues passed pet projects, and we don't have the funding for those pet projects. So the longer they delay, the longer the pet projects are stealing money from our core duties.
I could speak to two.
So-
I could speak to two pet projects right now. One of them, the Office of Evaluation, Performance, and Analytics, a department that is completely useless, has, in my opinion, this is my opinion, this ain't his opinion, but a department that has shown to be, to many, completely useless, and has not demonstrated one efficiency strategy that has been noted and touted at any supervisors meeting that I can remember. The Office of Economic Development and Government Affairs. I don't know that department is something that's necessary. I mean, look, and this is what I mean by autopilot, Ed. I mean, when you say we're going to push the timeline back to October, what you're going to do is, in the meantime, you're going to double what we're projecting, millions a month, in that deficit. And you're digging a further hole. So what happens is when you get down the timeline, you say, oh my God, now we can't pay this, and that. We have a bigger deficit. We got to make cuts to some of the most important programs because we kept paying on pet projects that can be folded into other offices. This is the problem at the city of San Diego. The mayor cut the DEI office, was one of the Mayor Todd Gloria's cuts. And a lot of folks, that would argue equity, if a Republican did that, didn't show up to blast Todd Gloria on that. But look at this. Look at this. You had a department that was folded. He said, we're going to fold this into our administrative protocol. Diversity, equity, inclusion is going to be a part of what we do, right? So you can take county pet projects that have been started, and if you want to keep some of those efforts going, you can fold them into other departments and cut. You got to cut now, because if you don't cut now, the surgery is going to be more extreme for the residents of this county later. Any further questions? Yeah. And I think that's the whole idea. So county must pass an on-time, a fair, and a balanced budget. I want to thank Supervisor Anderson, Dalia from District 1, who I asked to be here. And there's folks, like I said, that I spoke to in unincorporated areas of our county district, District 4, that when they became aware of this, because half of the time residents don't really know what's going on, right? Nobody tells them, nobody really reaches out to them. And if you're not on this person or that person's email list, you don't know. A lot of these folks are saying, no, I'm not for that. So, yeah.
I would, one of the problems with the county government as it stands now is Friday at noon, you can put a board letter in that we're going to vote on Tuesday. Yet people living in Spring Valley, 54,000 people live in Spring Valley. It's an unincorporated community. It's impacted directly by the delays. Over 600,000 people live in the unincorporated and live more than an hour away from this location. They find out Friday at noon if they're paying close attention for a vote that's on Tuesday. The system is working against the unincorporated community, where we're their only government and we're the ones solely responsible for all their public safety. So it's so important that we show up, do our jobs. We're not taking a cut in pay, so we shouldn't shirk our responsibilities and delay them by kicking the can. Thank you.
And in closing, I'll say this, Ed, to your question or point earlier. The core services that I mentioned, behavioral health, mental health, homelessness, child welfare, these are core services that are not going to, District 1 residents aren't going to, say a supervisor gets in, none of those supervisor candidates are going to disagree with investing and making public safety. None of those supervisor candidates are going to disagree with all of those investments. None of them. So the core services that he talks about, that I talk about, that Dalia talks about, these across, whether you're in an unincorporated part of San Diego or whether you're in cities, these are core services that everyone is for, no matter who they are. And so I am notably someone who's going to always hammer on child welfare because I know the impact of that department. We've got to ensure that our children in foster care don't get the brunt end of the stick. And they're talking about potentially cuts to Medicare and how that could impact our children in foster care on a federal level. I issued a letter to the president, with concerns about this. Issued a letter to Robert F. Kennedy, the HHS secretary, talking about this. We don't want our children in child welfare at the county level to get the back of the brunt because we pushed ourselves down the line, kicked the can down the road, as he says, and put ourselves in a structural deficit that is only growing by the minute. We've got to stop the bleeding now, if I can use that, or maybe I shouldn't say that. Some people might be offended by that statement. I'm talking about when you cut yourself, you keep bleeding, right? You cut yourself on the arm, you got to stop the bleeding. You got to put a Band-Aid on. You got to clean the wound. You got to put a Band-Aid on and protect yourself. We need the county to ensure that we don't keep cutting into a deficit that is only growing by the minute, and it's just getting more and more worse for our residents across the county. And I think that's the impact here of not doing the on-time, fair, and balanced budget, as we always have. So I thank Supervisor Anderson for pushing for this, and if there's no further questions, that concludes our news conference. Thank you.
Ed, can you name a government that delayed their budget that turned out to be a good outcome?
Denmark, 1946.
What did they do? I'm not familiar with that.
Well, I know you're not, that's why you asked me, and I know
Yeah.
everything. How about that? I came back at it pretty fast.
Yeah, you did. And I'm glad I'm not debating you.
You better. So we have a run, so when would the runoff be scheduled? I mean, that's all part of the district one. Right. I mean, even the election, you guys are saying, you know, we gotta go. I understand where we're at, but tell me the timeline and why October?
Well, October is the state's deadline for us.
What do you mean deadline?
So the state,